Recently, I watched the new show X-Men 97, and I have a lot of thought. Now, before we go into this, just some context of how I discovered this show so late when I am a massive X-Men fan. I didn't even know this show was a thing. I saw it on Disney Plus, but I didn't really pay attention, and I really haven't paid attention to a lot of Marvel things recently and actually quite some time. And so I saw it, I just kind of glanced at it, assumed it was either the original animated series or I just kind of overlooked it. But one day I was watching a list by Friendly Space Ninja, and it was going over like the top 10 shows of 2024, and I had it on in the background, and all of a sudden he said X-Men 97. Excuse me. There is a new X-Men show. So I immediately watched it. I don't think you understand. I love X-Men. I have always loved X-Men. The original animated series, I was obsessed with when I was a kid. I even really adored X-Men Evolution, which I know like now is kind of odd or whatever, and like in the grand scheme of like lore and the original comic books, like it's not the best, but I still love that show. It's still so cute. I love how they portray Nightcrawler. And of course I loved the 2000 trilogy. I still do. I don't watch the third film because no, but the first two films are still pretty great, even if they mess up on some of the like comic book lore. And I also like the reboot. I like X-Men First Class. I love X-Men's Day of Future Past. We don't talk about X-Men Apocalypse. And then the other X-Men films, obviously Logan's a classic. We don't talk about Origins. And but when I was a kid, I loved them all because I didn't know any better. And they were fun watches. They were fun things to watch, and I just loved that world. But anyways, so I watched X-Men 97. And I don't know how I feel about it. On the one hand, I think it's really good. I love the art style. It's such a nostalgic callback to the original series, but it's modernized in a way that feels fresh. I think the show handled a lot of things really well. I really liked how they approached Scott and Jean's story. I like the exploration of Rogue and the complications and the relationships that she has in the show. It's complicated and messy, and I just want to talk about it. Again, there were some truly great moments in the show and some that were incredibly powerful emotionally. I just don't know. There's just also some mixed feelings I have about it, and I think it's mostly just because I don't understand some of the character motivations, and at times that feels a little rushed. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Arcane. They handled the fast pacing well, because in some ways the show felt very episodic. Like there was an overarching story, but then there was like episodic moments that were happening in each episode, but they were such big moments that they kind of seemed like a little too much for just to be an episodic storyline. And maybe I'm just having complicated feelings because it ended on such a cliffhanger. I never watch shows when they're still going. I usually just watch them when they've already ended because I'm a very impatient person and I don't like waiting for new seasons, especially because recently every show takes 3 freaking centuries to have a new season. But this one's just... But I watched this one because I couldn't help it because it's X-Men. And now I have to wait. I don't know when the second season's coming out. I know that there's a second season, but I don't know when it's coming out. And I'm losing it a little bit because I just want it out. I just want answers, okay? But anyways, so as you can already tell, I have a lot to say and I just want to talk to you about it. I just want to rant and I want to go over storylines and just think about things and maybe express my thoughts and feelings about certain things that really affected me in this show. But anyways, so let's dive into how X-Men 97 came to be. So X-Men 97 is a revival of X-Men, the animated show from 1992. Marvel wanted to tap into the nostalgia of X-Men while also introducing a new modern audience to X-Men. This is the first mutant project that Marvel has produced since they got the rights to their characters back. The cast and crew are a mixture of those who worked on the original 1992 show. They also wanted to bring in some new faces to add some new perspective to the show. So for returning voice actors, we have Cal Dodd as Wolverine, George Buza as Beast, Alison Seeley Smith as Storm, She also voices Adversary, a character that comes a little bit later on in the show, and she did such great work with the two characters. It's really amazing how she did. Adrian Hough as Nightcrawler, and I just love him. I love him as Nightcrawler. He adds such charm and charisma to the character, and he's like a scene stealer every time his character is on screen. Chris Britton as Mr. Sinister, and my personal favorite, Leanore Zann as Rogue. She brings such a great charm to Rogue and such a strength and a beautiful vulnerability to the role, and it just hits you right in the feels. Like, there's a scene that happens later on, and oh my god, it's heart-wrenching how she portrays Rogue in the scene. With the new cast, we have Ray Chase as Scott Summers, Jennifer Hale as Jean Grey. She does have experience playing Jean in other mediums, but she really studied Catherine Disher's portrayal of Jean Grey in the original animated series to honor the original character and make it more of a through storyline. J.P. Karliak as Morph. Oh god. A.J. Locascio as Gambit, and oh my god, I loved him as Gambit. Oh, he did so good. It was such a delight every time Gambit was on screen. He brought such a charm to him. I loved it. Holly Cho as Jubilee. Alison Court, the original voice actress, was on helping Holly get into the role and assisted her, and also I think voiced some minor characters in the background and everything, which I thought was really cute. Matthew Waterson as Magneto, and Ross Marquand as Professor X. Now, there is a second season already in the works, but I am worried about the third season because Beau DeMayo, who was the creator and head writer, was fired after season 2, and he was replaced by Matthew Chauncey for the third season. So if the first and second season were headed by the same person and have a very similar tone and storyline, I'm kind of worried that the third season, now that there's someone else leading it, I wonder how it's going to turn out. I hope it turns out really well. I hope that they keep the general vibe of the story. I hope that DeMayo's the first and second season weren't DeMayo's style, that it was just more so the characters or whatever. We'll see how that turns out. But anyways, so now that we have the background, let's dive into the story of the show. We start off right away with the aftermath from the original series. Professor Xavier is presumed dead, and the X-Men have to continue to his mission of defending mutants and humans alike. The X-Men have now been sanctioned by the UN, and so they start off immediately by saving Roberto da Costa from the anti-mutant group Friends of Humanity. They continue to hunt for Trask, destroying Sentinels and Sentinel technology, and during this, Scott and Jean is pregnant, and they are having discussions that they might leave the team so that way they can raise their child away from the chaos of the X-Men and give the kid a semi-peaceful life. But before they can even make a final decision or an announcement, Magneto, Erik, shows up at the door and announces that Charles gave him the school and the X-Men in his last will and testament. This obviously causes a bunch of chaos. Scott and Jean decide to stay because they don't trust Erik, but Erik seems to have turned over a new leaf and is actually doing what Charles wanted, which is defending mutants and humans. We also start off right away with seeing that there is a bit of a complicated history between Erik and Rogue, and it is slowly driving a wedge between Rogue and Gambit's own relationship. The UN arrests Erik for his past actions, and he agrees to surrender and stand trial for these crimes. The FOH attempt to attack Erik during his trial. Storm throws herself in front of him to save him, and the weapon that they use ends up taking all of her abilities. Jean goes into labor, and Rogue is forced to take the doctor's memories and abilities because he refuses to help a mutant give birth to a mutant child. So she ends up having to do it herself, which is great. Love that. The baby is a boy, and they named their son Nathan. Storm ends up leaving the team to try and find a new life as a human, and right after she leaves, a woman shows up at the door who looks exactly like Jean. Beast discovers that this lookalike is actually the real Jean Grey, and that the Jean Grey that has been living at the house for an undisclosed amount of time and who has given birth to the child, that is a clone of Jean Grey. And she was made by Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister immediately takes hold of clone Jean's mind and has her come to his place and bring her son. Morph, who also was one of Mr. Sinister's experiments, knows of locations of certain labs, and so he takes the X-Men to try and find where clone Jean and Nathan are. They find the lab that they are in, and they manage to free clone Jean from being controlled by Mr. Sinister, and they rescue Nathan, but it is too late because Mr. Sinister has already infected Nathan with a virus that he believes will make him immortal and immune to everything, but because it wasn't finished, whatever, Nathan's now slowly dying. So clone Jean gives Nathan to Bishop to travel into the future to hopefully where there is a cure, because otherwise he's just going to not be there anymore. She then takes the name of Madelyne and she leaves. Storm, on her adventures to be a human, meets another mutant named Forge, and they go to his ranch where he says that he might have some technology that might be able to bring her powers back. But he is unable to cure her, and during these experiments, Forge reveals that it was his designs that inspired the collars that mutant abilities and the gun that ended up taking Storm's powers, and Storm gets furious and leaves. During the whole time that she's been at his ranch, she's been seeing an owl flying overhead quite often, and when she leaves, she is so overwhelmed by grief and anger and guilt in some ways that the owl reveals itself to be a demon called the Adversary, and it attacks her, forces her back into the ranch, and poisons Forge. While all this is happening, Jubilee is having it's her birthday, and she wants to celebrate it by going to an arcade because she loves video games, but Erik, of course, is like, nah, you need to train. And Roberto joins Jubilee in pouting in her room, where they discover that she has a mysterious new game console. They turn it on and they end up being sucked into a game that was created by Mojo, and it is and the game is built over Jubilee's past heroic events and actions. Jubilee is greatly enjoying the game until Roberto almost dies, and an older copy of herself from a beta version of the game comes to her and convinces her that if she stays in this game, she will be living a very empty life. And so together they defeat Mojo, and Roberto and Jubilee end up back in her room, and they end up kissing. Jean, she and Madelyne are both telepaths, obviously. They don't know when they were switched, so they both have the same memories. But so Jean is drowning because she doesn't know which memories are hers and which are Madelyne. She doesn't know, and Scott is also drowning because he doesn't know which Jean he was with at what time. And I mean, obviously he knows that during one of their moments that he was with Madelyne, hence why Madelyne was pregnant. And now that Nathan is gone, he's also mourning the loss of his son. And during them trying to overcome their grief and their confusion, it is revealed that Scott has been communicating secretly telepathically with Madelyne still, which infuriates Jean, obviously. Erik, Rogue, and Gambit travel to Genosha, the mutant country haven that is about to be brought into the UN. So the UN's trying to get Genosha to join as its own nation. Erik is offered to lead the country, but he won't do that unless Rogue joins him to lead the country. This is where we learn that many, many years ago, Rogue and Erik, when she was younger, were in a relationship because his abilities allow him to make a tiny little force field on his hand, and so she's able to touch him, not on his hand, his skin, but she's able to touch him and have a physical romantic relationship with him. him, but she had left him many years ago because she had felt like his demons took too much space in their relationship and there wasn't enough room for her. She has decided that because she can touch Magneto and not Gambit, and because the love has kind of always been unresolved, she has decided to accept Erik's offer to lead Genosha, and this breaks Gambit's heart. I will go over this more later. This is just the storyline. I will go over this lovely controversial event later. Please, I know. I will talk about it later. I have many thoughts and opinions on this, but I just want to get through the story first, okay? During the party celebrating Genosha becoming its own country and being invited into the UN, an upgraded Sentinel attacks and kills thousands of mutants, including Madelyne and Gambit and presumably Erik. We flash to the other side of the universe where we find out that Charles is not dead, that he is simply in a relationship with Leandra, leader of the Shi'ar. They want to marry, but Deathbird, Leandra's sister, Lilandra is her name, Lilandra, won't accept it and wants to force Charles to erase all memory of his time on Earth, including the X-Men. There is a fight. He manages to draw all of them in telepathically to try and teach them a lesson regarding races and humanity and history, and trying to show, like, you know, just because he's human and just because he has his memories doesn't mean that he's any weaker. But he is interrupted with a prophetic vision of Gambit dying, and so he ends his engagement and goes back to Earth to save the X-Men. During all of this, Storm is still trapped at the ranch with the demon, the adversary, and the Forge is slowly dying, and Storm has to not battle the demon herself. She has to battle her feelings and emotions and her insecurities and her desires. And once she overcomes her fears, and she is able to defeat the adversary, and her powers come back. Rogue goes rogue in her grief and hunts down Gyrick and Trask, to which she finds the former and absorbs his memories. She leaves him, and shortly after, he is mysteriously killed. Trask then contacts the X-Men as he is terrified and is asking for their help. They go to save him, and along the way they pick up Rogue, who is not the one scaring him, by the way, but they pick her up and go to see him. Roberto and Jubilee go to his mother, where he reveals that he is a mutant, and his mom is surprisingly, yeah, sure, okay, whatever, but she tells him that he has to keep it a secret, as it would not look good for their family if he was revealed to be a mutant. The X-Men learn that Mr. Sinister and the UN secret division, OZT division, has been developing highly advanced Sentinel technology. Rogue, after this reveal, kills Trask, which inadvertently activates this new Sentinel program. It turns Trask and thousands of others into human Sentinel hybrids. Cable arrives, revealing that the real threat is Bastion, who killed Gyrick after Rogue visited him, and he is the one behind all of these plans. He also reveals that Erik is alive and being held captive by Bastion, and that Charles is also alive. Cable is from the future and reveals that the Genosha massacre is a absolute point of time and cannot be changed. Bastion uses it to start a 300-year war that will lead to the enslavement of mutants in a human utopia. Xavier's school is burned down, mutants are hunted, and a horrified human ally, Cooper, sees Erik being essentially tortured and frees him. Erik is furious and enraged, obviously, and he causes a worldwide blackout that kills thousands but also shuts down all of the Prime Sentinels. Now, cool little Easter egg is when he says enough and all of the stuff happens. That is actually stolen from his daughter, because in the comics, Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff, is his daughter, and there is a wonderful storyline where she essentially loses her mind, kind of like how we saw in the TV show WandaVision and a little bit in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. She like fully loses her mind and everything, and she blames mutants, and so she says enough, and with her amazing abilities she kind of cancels out like half the population's mutant like abilities, and it's a really great storyline. I really enjoy it, and I just find it cool that they hinted at that with Erik, who in the comics is her father. Anyways, Charles returns and summons the X-Men. Charles is met with distrust, but the X-Men suck it up because they have to work together in order to defeat Bastion, and they need to try and convince Erik, Magneto, to reverse his blackout. Magneto has created his mutant heaven on an asteroid that he calls Asteroid M. Roberto ends up breaking Jubilee's heart and joins Magneto, as right before this, when the Sentinels were still active and everything, his mother gave him over to the Sentinels. Shit, mother. And also Rogue ends up joining Magneto on Asteroid M, which hurts her brother Nightcrawler, which I really want them to have more scenes together. I want Nightcrawler and Rogue focus time. I want more of it because they're so good. They're so cute. Anyways, the X-Men split into two teams to handle the two different threats. Jean, Beast, Cable, and Forge fight Bastion. They begin to lose, and Jean desperately reaches out towards Scott to let him know that they are losing. During this, Scott, Charles, and Logan and Storm is with the other team, but Logan, Scott, and Charles are fighting Magneto and his group, and Jubilee's with them. I'm trying to remember. I kind of forgot. But anyways, Charles almost has control of Magneto, but gets thrown off, and Logan manages to critically wound Magneto, but he retaliates by ripping the adamantium from Logan's skeleton and critically injuring him. Charles takes control of Magneto's mind again and forces him to reverse the blackout. Jean manages to connect with the Phoenix Force and puts a collar, the muting collar, onto Bastion to try and get him so that way he can't connect with the Prime Sentinels and their humanity will return to them. But this causes Bastion to evolve into his very own weapon, and he launches at the asteroid M to destroy it, to bring it down to Earth to create an extinction event. The US government does what the US government does best and fires missiles. So even though the X-Men defeat Bastion, they still fire the missiles and the asteroid starts coming down to Earth with Xavier's help, because when Charles took over Erik's mind, it caused Erik's mind to fracture. Charles manages to save Erik from the depths of his mind, and they both return to consciousness and help destroy the asteroid and launch it back into space. While they're still on it, it explodes and they are all presumed dead. I forgot to mention that Nathan is also Jean and Scott's son. So as they're all dying, essentially, Jean and Scott, who have been having a really hard relationship with their son Nathan from the future, they say goodbye to him and they mend their relationship right before they are presumed dead. Bishop arrives 6 months later and tells Forge that the X-Men are trapped in time. We see that Jean and Scott are stuck in a desolate future and they meet a very young Nathan. Rogue, Nightcrawler, Beast, Xavier, and Magneto are stuck in ancient Egypt where they meet a young Apocalypse. In modern day Genosha ruins, modern day Apocalypse finds one of Gambit's playing cards. So that's how season 1 ends. And if you know the comics, you know, you can see the inspirations from the following stories. The Trial of Magneto, which explores the complex villain to potential ally story arc. Mutant Massacre, which explores the Marauders' attack on the Morlocks, leading to significant casualties among the mutant community. Operation Zero Tolerance, which is a storyline of Bastion being backed by the government to capture and eliminate mutants. Life Death, which is an Uncanny X-Men storyline, and it explores Storm losing her powers and her journey of self-discovery. There is and then also Inferno, which is the crossover where we see Madelyne Pryor becoming the Goblin Queen, leading to demonic invasions and personal conflicts within the X-Men. It's been quite a few years since I've read or really explored any of these stories, so I think there might be some more that I missed or whatever, or certain details that I haven't caught on to. But again, it's been a very long time since I've read any of these. But from what I remember, they do a really good job of incorporating the comic book stories into this show and blending them and changing just the right amount of details to make it a cohesive modern day story. Now, I do have some things that I need to get off my chest about this show. Some things that I have a rant. It's not some things, it's mostly just one thing. Okay, so hang on. I need my energy for this. I want to talk about the storyline that affected me the most in this show, mostly because it involves my favorite characters of all of X-Men. Okay, Erik, Remy, and Marie. I am not a huge fan of love triangles. I have a very big issue with them the majority of the time because I don't really think they add very much value to most stories. I don't think they add very much value narratively. I think they add a lot of drama and they are very avoidable for a lot of reasons. And I just think half the time they're mostly very freaking annoying. But there are times where they can be good in a story. Not in real life, but in a story, because they help the protagonist learn certain lessons and grow in certain ways. One of the best examples is the Hunger Games love triangle. We see with her the love triangle that Katniss is in, with one of the two men that she chooses helps decide what kind of person, what kind of future she wants. With Gale, who has a very similar temper as her, they kind of embrace each other's both good and bad sides and kind of amplify the bad sides. We see that if they ended up together, their relationship can cause a lot more harm than good, like with Prim's death. And then with Peeta, who is a very good person and helps smooth down Katniss's rougher edges, she can see not just the negative things in life, but also some of the good things, and she can fight for the good things and do things in a way that doesn't cause as many problems, and she can find different ways to approach problems and think them through. Another one of my favorite love triangles is the love triangle in Infernal Devices with Will, Jem, and Tessa. There's not so much of a lesson to learn for Tessa to choose between the two men, but by falling in love with the one, she also, because Will and Jem are brothers / closer than brothers, falling in love with the one inevitably brings her closer to the next one, and all three of them have flaws. They have pros and cons to each and every one of them. With the three of them together, Tessa helps Will see certain things a different way. Jem always helps Will see things a different way, and same thing with Jem, with Will helping Jem and Tessa helping Jem in different ways, and then both of them helping Tessa. All three of them are so intermingled that the love triangle is just kind of seems like a three-way relationship in some ways, because they can't really escape one without the other, and as a trio they are a whole, and even with just two of them they are kind of missing certain things and they don't learn certain lessons, and when there's the three of them, they approach conflicts a lot better, and their characters are a lot better, and they make better decisions, and they learn lessons as together as possible. And it's like a golden thread like intermingles all of them, and you can't really have any of them doing one thing without the other. So I think that one's a really good love triangle in the sense of like there's no really picking and choosing, because they all are so intermingled together, and there's no good or bad person. There's no one that brings out the inherent flaws in the other. They're all just good people, and they all just belong together in a way. Now, so that's my little rant about love triangles. And then I do want to say I've seen a lot of discourse online about how poor Gambit, that many people are saying that they used to love Rogue as a character and now they hate her and they think she deserves the worst ever, and that she never deserved Gambit. Her and Gambit never should have been together, that she is just the most terrible character and they hate her now. And I'm sorry, but if you think this one storyline ruins her character completely out of if you include the animated animated series, if you include 4 seasons of that one and the next 3 seasons of this one, if one storyline ruins her for you, I'm sorry, but that doesn't make any sense. Does she make a pretty dumb decision that I will explain more of why I don't think it was the dumbest decision? Yes. Do I think Rogue and Gambit are endgame? Yes. I love them together. I think they're really good together, but I understand where Rogue is coming from, and this is where I will say that I think for such a controversial storyline, which they had to know is going to be super controversial, I think an additional scene or 2 in another episode, or just an additional episode, or maybe just a little bit more time to let this sit and breathe would have been helpful, because I'll get into it. So if you don't know, a little bit of backstory is in the comics, and also in this lore, in this story of this show, Rogue is the adopted daughter of Mystique. Nightcrawler is the biological son of Mystique. And so they are brother and sister, hence why they refer to each other as brother and sister in this show. And again, I will keep repeating, we need more scenes of them together. I want more storylines of just the 2 of them, because I love the 2 of them. But anyways, and in the comics, there is a romance between Rogue and Magneto, and they do have a child at some point. And also in the comics, I know that there's a later time where Rogue learns how to control her abilities, and her and Gambit are able to have a physical relationship, but we haven't hit that point in the rules and laws of this show yet, so I'm going to dismiss that. So because of the established lore of the show and storyline, Rogue has never been able to be skin to skin, physically intimate with Gambit. And we have to consider, because it's established in the show, that this is not the same Rogue that we've seen in the 2000 X-Men. This is not the same Rogue from X-Men Evolution that a lot of audiences have seen. This is a Rogue who is older. We're not starting off with a Rogue who kissed a boy, a high school crush one time, and then he went to a coma and she hasn't touched anyone since. Bone is here to join mama in my little ranting. Good job. But yeah, so this is a girl who had that happen, but she has also met someone at a little bit later point in life where she was able to have a physical relationship with. And she is surrounded by, just like we all are, the stereotypical versions of love that we see every day, including her. So, touching, kissing, intimacy. And yes, there are other ways to show love and affection, but that is the stereotypical way that romantic love is portrayed, both in media, in real life, in magazines, everything. This is 1997, so a lot of it would be like television and magazines for her that she'd be seeing this. And also on her team, because Jean and Scott are a couple and they have been obviously very romantic, even when it was Madelyne, not actually Jean, but hence why Madelyne was pregnant. They are physically intimate. They are the couple. That's who her team leaders are. She's seeing this all the time. This is something that I wish the show would have shown more of, so that way we could see her lingering on these stereotypical views and visions of and portrayals of love, so that way we could understand, the audience could understand her mentally a little bit more. So it is believable that she doesn't believe she can be loved or love properly without the ability to physically be intimate with someone else. And so, because with Gambit, she doesn't believe that she is able to love him properly or be loved properly by him, which is why she's always kept him at arm's length. And then to add some other commentary, she was with Erik, and we don't know how long of a time, but she must have fallen, we can tell that they fell genuinely in love with one another. Maybe for Marie, it was a little bit more of infatuation because she was younger, but there was a love there. And she left because she didn't feel like she had enough space in his life. But the relationship never really ended. She just left, from what we can tell. And so in a lot of ways, that love was always unresolved. It never had a real ending. So yes, Marie loves Remy, but she doesn't feel like it is a proper kind of love. She doesn't feel like she can really be with him because of her abilities holding her back. Then Erik comes back into her life, and this is someone that she can have a stereotypical kind of romantic love with, and it never had a true ending. And so, you know, I think we've all had like the unrequited love or that unresolved love or something where something ends a little too soon and you don't understand why, or there's not really a real ending, so there's not really a real bookmark to it. And so yeah, there was probably still a flame there that was always been there. And then also there is a desperate desire from her, as we've seen throughout all mediums of every show and movie that we've ever seen, and even the comics, of her always wanting to be able to touch someone. And she does fall prey to that. She touches Erik, she kisses him. But as soon as she kisses him, she realizes something that Remy had said earlier, that there are some things that go deeper than skin. And this is something that I think is very important that a lot of fans are missing. She had to learn this for herself. And this is something that I think Remy was very aware of, because she realizes after she kisses Erik that the love that she has for Erik is probably closer to infatuation and a craving and a desire, whereas the love that she has for Remy is something true and genuine and a real partnership and a real friendship and a real soulmate kind of love. And I think Remy understood that when she was telling him like, hey, I think I want to join Erik and lead Genosha, and I think we're gonna try and be something. And obviously his feelings are hurt, and obviously he's crying and she's crying because she's telling him about her past with Erik and everything. And from what I can tell, other than the fact that they touched hands and maybe had long discussions while holding hands or something in his office, from what we can tell, Rogue never went further than that before telling Remy, before Erik invited her to be a leader with him. So I'm just going to hold faith to that. But Remy says, like, I will be there for you and I will be your friend. And I think he says something else like, I will be waiting for you to realize the same thing, as far as like that there's some things deeper than skin. But I think that's why he didn't put up more of a fight or anything, because yes, also he was heartbroken, but it's something that Rogue had to learn. Rogue's greatest desire, and she feels like she's always missing out on the fact that she can't touch anyone. And maybe with her being able to touch Erik, she would realize, which she did, that you don't need to have physical intimacy and contact with someone to have a genuine sort of love. And that was something that I think Remy understood that Rogue had to understand herself personally. And I also choose to believe that Gambit, Remy, knew that Marie, Rogue, chose him at the end when they were fighting side by side against that evolved sentinel on Genosha right before he died, because she was fighting next to him, not next to Erik. Now we can just say like, oh, it's, you know, they're fighting sentinels or whatever, and he had no idea because obviously I didn't discuss it, and then he died. But I think the fact that she flew out next to him and was with him, I personally am choosing to believe that he knew that she'd come to realize what he had been saying and had ended up choosing him. Also, I'm getting so pissed off because I want the narrative of Gambit intentionally unaliving himself after Rogue kissing Magneto. I want that narrative to stop, because did anyone fucking pay attention to the episode? There is the party. Gambit leaves when he sees Rogue and Magneto being together, and then the Sentinel attacks. There's an explosion. Everyone, Rogue, Magneto, Gambit, and any other mutants that are able to fight, they get up after the explosion and they start fighting. And Gambit is doing what he has done in almost every battle episode that we've seen throughout the original animated series and this one, where he is just... And Rogue's doing the same thing, and Magneto's doing the same thing, where they're intentionally throwing themselves at the Sentinel. They're fighting, they're trying to find a weak point, they're doing their best to protect the civilians and the other mutants, and they're just fighting. And the Sentinel adapts to Gambit's fighting style and stabs him, and it's a fatal wound. It is a thing that goes through Gambit's entire middle body. He didn't plan that. He was just doing what he always does, fighting, and his power is kind of close combat. And because he is there and is a fatal wound that he can't just yank himself out of because it is a giant rod through the middle of his body, he activates it and then causes the explosion with his abilities. Enough. It wasn't an intentional event. It wasn't. I hate seeing that. I really do. I hate the fact that the writers had him die and that was a decision that they made, but it wasn't a decision that of him being like, hey, I'm heartbroken, so I'm just going to explode myself and bada bing, bada boom. I could have survived with even if there was no explosion. Like, he wouldn't have survived anyways. And another side note, I do think Erik Magneto genuinely does love and care for Rogue, as we saw in his broken psyche after when Charles is trying to help him out of his drowning waters. Rogue is one of the people in his waters. And I think he's extremely heartbroken that she has left him for a second time. And I think there is a really interesting exploration of that story and that relationship that will come in season 2. At least I hope so. I know that there's an age gap thing, but that's a whole different topic, a whole different video that I'm just not going to get into right here. But yeah, so I'm really interested in how they're going to approach their relationship in season 2 now that the two are trapped in ancient Egypt together. And Erik seems very, very heartbroken by what Rogue did. She did join him on asteroid M, and we didn't get any scenes of them talking after that, but I just wonder if that was just because, one, there was a war going on, there was so many things happening so rapidly, and two, he had literally just been drugged and tortured for a minute and had a meltdown, and that's why there was the blackout and the asteroid M, and so maybe he just wasn't able to talk at the moment. But yeah, so I'm kind of curious about that one. And so I'm curious to see, is there going to be a renewed spark in their romance in season 2 with them being in ancient Egypt? And if Gambit really is alive when they do manage to come back to this time, like what's going to happen, between Gambit and Rogue and Magneto? And I don't care what you Rogue haters say, I want Rogue and Gambit back together. This also leads to my next minor rant that is not really related to the show, but there's no other place for me to talk about this, so I want to talk about this. I want there to be more, I want Rogue to have her own show or something, because I think her character is so infinitely fascinating. Her powers are incredibly interesting. They open a whole world of possibilities for storylines, and it's such a fertile ground for storytelling and possibilities that I just can't believe that no one's taken advantage of it yet. The live action movies did not do any sort of justice to Rogue's character. The only one that was semi-decent was the X-Men 2000 film, and I liked what they did with the relationship between Logan and Rogue and having a pseudo father-daughter relationship, and I thought that could be explored a lot more and a lot better in other films, but obviously that wasn't. I think her character is great in the original series, but it's an ensemble, so obviously there's not a lot of moments for her to shine and for full exploration of her story. And also she's already a good guy by then in the comics. She is raised by Mystique, and she works with the Brotherhood, and she is an active member with them. And we discover with her in the comics that she holds on to people's psyches when she touches them. One of the people whose powers and abilities and psyches she has stolen was Miss Marvel, aka Captain Marvel. That personality starts to really overtake her mind in the comic, and the Brotherhood is unable to help her, so she turns to the X-Men, to Charles Xavier, to help her. That ends up inspiring her to join the X-Men and turn against her adoptive mother and everything. And I think that's something super interesting. I would love to see that storyline or something akin to it play out, where she starts off as the villain and turns into the good guy. I even read a fanfic where she was given like the same treatment as Logan, because like her abilities are so endlessly fascinating. She was experimented on in a lab. The X-Men end up rescuing her from the lab. That could be interesting. But I really think that there's so many possibilities, and I think that's one of the things too with that Marvel, now that they have the X-Men and they have mutants, I think it's the perfect opportunity to grab the magic from what they had from the very first Avengers films, which is, you can take the more well-known characters like Professor Professor X and Magneto and stuff, but I think that would be a disservice because it's been done so many times. I think they need to do with the X-Men what they did with the original Avengers, which is take the lesser known characters and have individual shows or movies, preferably movies, but shows or movies of these characters, and have these standalone films or shows of these individual characters, and then have a big ensemble event like the Avengers films, but have them be X-Men, where all these characters from these standalone films come and unite together for a big threat in the film. I think that'd be super, super cool. I would love that. That'd be so interesting, in my opinion. I think it's a great idea, and I think Marvel should take advantage of that, but I just don't know if Marvel's gonna do that. Because now everything has to be done so quickly and they're so focused on Avengers. But I think the Avengers, I think that era is done. Like, I think the mutants and X-Men, I think that is the perfect next step for Marvel. I would love to see that personally. Let me know if you feel the same way, if you think that's a good idea or not. But anyways, overall, I think I'm done ranting about this show. I know that the biggest storyline, I know that what bothered me the most, or what I talked about the most, wasn't the most important storyline in X-Men 97, but that was the most important one to me. Overall, I think they did a really good job bringing in this revival to modern audiences. I think that they approached the storylines really well, the characters really well. I really, really enjoyed Jean, Madelyne, Scott, and Nathan's storyline. I thought it was very well done. I thought the emotional complexities were fabulous to it. And the trauma of not trusting your own memories, of losing a child, and the powerful sort of love that links them all together. I think it was beautifully well done. I really liked how they did Storm's self-discovery, and I really enjoyed that. I'm incredibly curious as to what they will do next. I still have a few mixed feelings on certain things because of bias, and I really want certain stories to be explored more. But again, I think they did a really, really good job. And I think they did a really good job of honoring the story and the characters, and honoring the love that returning fans had as well. What did you think? Do you agree, disagree? What are your thoughts and viewpoints? Please let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you would like to see more content like this, please subscribe. Until next time, bye.